We're putting in the old-fashioned, foreign-made, 500-foot-tall leviathans that are going to destroy our natural environment. These are not what we need here in Chautauqua County. The only green thing about those is money, because the LLCs, these Wall Street LLCs that have been created for the sole purpose of sucking up taxpayer dollars and spitting them back out to the crony capitalists that are sucking up all that money. This is not what we need here in Chautauqua County. We don't need our natural vistas destroyed by this. We don't need the health effects that have been associated with windmills. Everything that you can say about fracking, affecting our water table, affecting human health, devastating property values, everything like that can be said about windmills, but yet our governor is embracing windmills and has cast away fracking for the same reasons. This is ridiculous. And I'll tell you something, this energy plan of his, 50 by 30, it sucks.
We set the most aggressive goal in the country for use of renewables, aiming for 50% of renewable energy by the year 2030.
My house is surrounded by these things.
I was from Orangeville, New York, until I was forced to sell my beloved 100 acres of land in God's country because of the negative impacts of the wind turbines. Back in 2007, I had got wind of the fact, no pun intended, that they were headed towards Orangeville. I had a friend in Sheldon, and she was having all kinds of issues from the shadow flicker and the noise.
Let me say this. First, I was passively in favor of wind turbines. I had people come along, let me put placards up against them, and I'm like, you know, if this is the way we're going to have to go, we're going to have to go with it.
We found out that Wyoming County was slated to have over 2,000 industrial wind turbines strewn throughout the entire 16-town county. It doesn't take long to find out what a giant consumer fraud the whole thing is.
For 50 by any foreseeable future is impossible. Exorbitantly expensive. Environmentally destructive in all kinds of dimensions, and is not going to be achieved. This is, I think, pandering, frankly, to the environmental left as Governor Cuomo contemplates a run for the presidency in 2020 or 2024. The environmental impacts of large wind farms are really quite stark in terms of unsightly land use, noise, flicker effects, heavy metal pollution from the production of the wind turbines themselves.
The 50 by 30 program is unrealistic for a number of reasons. First and foremost, in order to have 50% of our electricity come from renewable energy, that might be possible in a smaller state like Kansas or Wyoming, but New York State is one of the largest users of electricity in the world, and New York City in particular. So to do that, you're going to have to blanket all of upstate New York with windmills and solar panels. And that is just devastating to one of the main assets that we have here, which is the pristine beauty of our outdoors. That's what separates us from New York City. So I think it's unrealistic, and on top of that, going to be extremely expensive to taxpayers, because wind energy is not self-sustaining. It will have to be subsidized. And to do 50% of the large demand that New York State has for electricity in a subsidy format is going to cost billions perpetually to the taxpayers.
What that's going to do is raise the electricity rates for people in New York State. We have evidence in Europe that it's rapidly increasing the cost of electricity. The top 12 wind power states in the U.S. have had electricity rising at a much faster rate than the country, because transmission has to be built. That's the one thing that we know renewables do, is raise the cost of electricity, and that of course hurts lower income folks. And On the other hand, it's not going to do anything for the climate. There are 2,400 coal-fired power plants in planning or being constructed across the world right now. China is constructing 1,000. India is constructing 400. Even Japan's building 45. What you do in New York State isn't going to have any effect on global temperatures, but it's going to raise energy prices for New York citizens.
I mean, you could call it 55-20-0 because you're going to accomplish, zero. You're just going to hurt New Yorkers by making energy cost more. You're going to have no effect on the environment. New York State, even California, even the United States. You could take us offline, just zero out our CO2 emissions, and you would make precious little difference to atmospheric CO2 by the year 2100. So, these just sort of forced transition from fossil fuels into quote-unquote green energy, which is really not all that green, is going to accomplish nothing except make New Yorkers poorer.
We set the most aggressive goal in the country.
You can't just say, all right, we're going to create enough wind and solar to power all of New York State. No, what you'll do is you will reduce the amount of coal, nuclear, gas, and oil generation. You'll reduce that in New York, and then you'll just take electricity from Canada, from other states around you, maybe Pennsylvania. So what happens is, and they're doing the same in Massachusetts. They're lowering the amount of electricity that they will allow to be sold by the electric company from domestic consumption of those so-called fossil fuels. But it's all really phony when you come down to it, because you're still getting electricity that's produced by coal, burning of coal or burning of natural gas. You're getting the same amount. It's just coming from other states. How that helps New York State is rather a puzzle.
By using wind energy to accomplish Albany's 50-30 goal, it will be necessary, by some estimates, to cover an area the size of Long Island with wind turbines. Rest assured that Long Island itself will not host the wind farms.
For 50% of renewable energy by the year 2030.
The people that are paying for this garbage with our tax dollars are the very people like Linda, Kathy, and Al who are being assaulted with their own taxpayer money. Al had to sell his home because he couldn't even live in it anymore. And you can tell how passionate I get when I talk about this, because it's not right.
Wind and solar power have the effect of increasing rather than decreasing the emissions of conventional pollutants and greenhouse gases, because they're so unreliable. They have to be backed up with conventional, either coal or gas-fired power plants, and those have to be cycled up and down depending on whether on wind and sunlight conditions. And the cycling of those plants means they have to be run inefficiently, which increases their emissions.
New York State turbines are averaging a pathetic 23% capacity factor if they're producing at all.
We have more oil, coal, natural gas to keep us going for centuries. So renewable is really a false choice.
The bigger problem is the low power density available for wind farms. There's just nothing you can do about it.
A project such as the Casadega Wind Farm provides renewable energy and tax base for the community.
Local 1249 recognizes the state's emphasis on renewable energy as an important part of the overall energy plan.
The proposed 123 wind turbines that will be in our connecting townships. All of them are about 37 feet shorter than the tallest building in Buffalo. Monstrous.
I'd just like to give everybody, the legislators and the county executive, a little background on the wind power project that we've heard so much about. It consists of 54 turbines, 23 in the town of Charlotte, 30 in the town of Cherry Creek, and 1 in Arkwright. It will connect to the substation in Stockton, and it's 126 megawatts.
For the constituents that have to live with it, let's look at those wind turbines. You're destroying thousands of acres of land. You're pouring millions of tons of concrete, lots of trucks to truck in. You're destroying these rural roads because you have to use all these big trucks to truck in both the base of the wind turbines and the turbines themselves. Each base takes, half a dozen trucks, and each turbine takes a separate truck at least. And what's the energy you produce? So the wind turbines there might get, really, really generous estimate, 30% capacity. If you have 100 turbines, 2.5 megawatts, maximum, the rated capacity, that's 250 megawatts of power. Add another 50 turbines, that's another 125, 375 megawatts of power at peak capacity. So on the days they're running at full bore, you're getting 350 megawatts of power. But since they only run 30% of the time or less, you're getting much less than that. A small natural gas powered plant with a small footprint on the environment, a little pad, 100 acres max, as opposed to the hundreds of thousands of acres that these turbines are going to take up, would produce more power more reliably. And if you're really, really concerned about carbon dioxide emissions, would reduce CO2 emissions.
And to balance the load on the grid at any given time, it needs to be matched with another power source, because you need to supply this dependable power so that when you flick your switch, your light comes on.
The highly variable power with wind speed. Primarily you make a 10% change in the wind speed, you make a 30% change in the power. Or alternatively, if say the wind speed goes from 10 miles an hour to 20, the power goes up by a factor of 8. Or if it goes from 20 down to 10, the power goes down by a factor of 8. So the grid simply cannot take the high, the rapid fluctuation in the power. And if you want to have steady power, you can't have wind turbines.
Every time these wind turbine projects come into a town, they tear them apart. It's really, really horrible. You can see this in other areas of our state and of our country where these wind turbine projects have come to be. And what happens is they come into town and they pit neighbor against neighbor, elected officials against their constituents, and so on and so forth. And I can't blame those landowners that are in some cases struggling, maybe hanging on to a family farm and hanging on by a thread, and someone comes in and they're dangling money in front of them. I understand that they want to take it.
Contacted my town board, gave them a lot of information, all of which they ignored, as several members on the town board had contracts with the wind company, which happens more often than not in a lot of the wind projects.
Some of the townships are apparently conflicted in interest, where various town municipal officers have been identified by the New York State Attorney General as having financial interest in the wind farms.
They are in sprawling industrial wind factories that destroy the habitat, destroy civility. They are the most environmentally unfriendly things that you could ever imagine. They destroy communities. Every community that's been targeted in this state is destroyed. People hate one another.
Hi, my name's Rob Bomber. I own a piece of property up on East Road. A lot of my friends and neighbors around that area don't like the idea of the wind turbines. First of all, we weren't even part of the conversation because we don't live around here. All right, a lot of people that own properties don't live around here. When I was identified as a stakeholder, I figure, okay, they're gonna send me some stuff, I'm gonna learn all about this. Nothing, until I got a letter from Everett Power on January 18th saying there was a big meeting at Sinclairville Fire Hall on the 9th. Well, I wasn't part of that conversation. We were left in the dark. We pay taxes, we support the community, we support local businesses, we come in for hunting, summertime, everything else. If it goes, I'm not gonna spend another penny in this town. I got a long ride.
This is important. We need to really make ourselves aware and enlighten ourselves. It's not about fighting with one another.
Here in our community, we have a chance to move toward that goal. Windmills could create energy that we could put our pride in, and our local taxes would be reduced so everyone that lives here could be benefited. So let us stop fighting and do what's good for us and have some damn common sense.
Good for who?
For all of us.
You have to do serious digging to find anything, even though it should be public record.
I just wanted you to know, regardless of what happens and the outcome on this, that we have done a lot of research. It isn't that we just sit on our hands and just thought we was going to get a lot of money.
I don't doubt your integrity at all. Up in Arkwright, all right, none of this PIP stuff is done. We don't know anything about our water quality, the wildlife, the noise. Nothing is being told. So we formed a group and we are doing a class action. Now, if anyone wants to join us and help us, I've got a handout here for contact information. All right? I'm done.
Our local governments have spoken. Town of Cherry Creek and Charlotte. The boards have said, hey, we're in favor of it.
But I know one thing that is absolutely true. There has been no transparency in this process from the beginning.
The only thing that has ever been reliably generated by industrial wind is complete and utter civil discord.
But we have done an awful lot of research on this, and all of us on the board here are for the town. We're not for individual people.
When they put these things up, I'm talking about the towns and being divided. This is exactly what happened in this town, exactly what happened down this road. Nobody talks to anybody because the turbine and lease land owners, I don't want to have anything to do with them. They threw me under the bus. They didn't give a hoot about me at one bit.
Where is the liberty and justice when I have neighbors telling me that they can do whatever they want to with their land and it sucks to be you?
Stand underneath them. I don't find any dead birds. I don't find any pollution, and we all need energy. So I don't know what the problem is.
There's at least 16 surrounding this property. They just went one right after the other.
We don't want to fight with the ones who are the proponents for these, but they're not really reading this fine print.
The project will mean a lot for Arkwright residents. It will raise approximately $350,000 annually for the town of Arkwright.
The public and the appropriate boards or commissions have been made aware of the project and potential issues and have determined that there will not be a substantial negative impact.
What I said was I didn't think you were going to see your taxes lower. You are going to benefit. Huh? By the equipment you're going to get for the town.
People are becoming ill and they're having to abandon their homes. They have found that infrasound can travel 6 miles. The state of Vermont, just yesterday, Public Service Board announced that from here on, all wind turbine setbacks in the state of Vermont would be 5,000 feet. That's 5 times what the setbacks are here in Chautauqua County. The interesting thing about that is that that's just based on decibels. In other words, what we can hear. That the wind industry still denies that there is an impact from low frequency vibration and infrasound, in direct contradiction to any number of studies that have been published within the last year, not only in the United States, but around the world.
They have never, ever done any research on the health impacts of these things on people as they continue to site them only hundreds of feet from people's homes.
You come down with a sinus and a bronchitis, more antibiotics, and the despondency and the depression and the suicidal part, it's hard to explain. You get to a point where you don't care if you make it or not.
They are fully aware of infrasound. Professionals have advised them of it but they choose to ignore it and do no health studies.
The infrasound has to be addressed. That's one thing. EverPower denies it, that it's an issue if it's subaudible. That's contrary to all the research that's coming out.
The health problems that they've talked about were called wind turbine syndrome. Dr. Nina Pierpont had done information on, and some of it was caused, infrasound was a major problem, and besides the cardiovascular issues, it actually influences the inocular fluid in the body, and that's why a lot of people have ear problems.
What every audiologist needs to know about wind turbine noise would be the equivalent of a doctor getting something on the latest disease, Ebola, etc. And if you read that, you would be upset that that kind of knowledge is kept privy, in that the general public isn't aware of the dangers of the infrasound. Every wind company official has got to know by now, because I have stacks of it, Mary knows, she has a lot of it, that at least 1/3 of the people are affected by these things in one form or another that we know of.
Is 45 dBA. So that's akin to, a quiet room, soft refrigerator hum, something like that. So that's what the level is. Now again, you can't relate that directly back to a setback distance, but that's the level that we commit to.
Each turbine makes its own unique noise. They creak and they groan, and the wind sound is different, so that when you get the cumulative impact of a bunch of wind turbines, people forget it's not just one. You're at the mercy of them. And when you can't sleep at night and you wake up, all of a sudden you get a harsher wind, especially in the winter, the fall, and this wet weather. If they're on the west side of you, which a bunch of them are on our Croats Road, myself, Kathy Orr, and Linda Maxon, it's constant noise.
You can hear, you can feel the house vibrating. You can, through the noise, or you can hear the noise through the doors and the windows all closed. You can hear the noise in this house.
The World Health Organization advised back then that they should not be any closer than 1.25 miles at the nearest, and so to be, 1,320 feet from a house is criminal.
It drove me out of my home, and I believe completely that there are so many people around who suffer various ailments that unless you knew, you would never connect to the wind turbines.
I cannot see where people have the audacity of saying that they cannot be lived around. I've had my hands on the bases of towers. I know what they are. I know what they look like. I know what they sound like.
Try living under one of them or near them within a 1/4 mile, 1/2 mile, day after day after day, and hearing the humming and feeling the vibration, the infrasound. You don't even have to hear it, it's felt. It's felt in your home when you put a glass of water on your counter and you watch your water vibrate.
Some of the points you guys brought up against it, I think are fine. They're good points. I don't know if they're valid or not, but they're good points. And some of them I think are baloney, but it's the same the other way.
The sitting board will determine if the proposed facility is a beneficial addition or a substitute for generation capacity, and is in the public's interest.
But the Park Commission, after reviewing the SEIS, was satisfied that the noise would not be an issue and that no safety concerns were present.
I know change is difficult, but we must, as a community and state, pursue alternative opportunities that create revenues to substantiate our rural way of life.
The value of land around the site, say even 1 mile away, if the property value decreases?
Yeah, I have to be honest with you, we didn't do a post-construction report or any sort of, because we weren't asked to. It wasn't something that we looked into doing, and we've had no complaints from the town of Howard. Can we sit here as a company and say that some property value around a project is not going to be affected, or no property value? No. And to your point, sir, I cannot say whether or not a home value in a project area, I won't sit here and say that no home value in a project area would be adversely affected, because certainly someone's desire to move into an area could be adversely affected by that. There certainly could and will be homes that people won't see as desirable, but that doesn't mean that no one will buy it.
Property damage loss is a very large effect. I sold a farm that was 100 acres in Orangeville, and according to what I got for it, I believe that I lost around $100,000 on that farm.
I lost $120,000 on my home, which sat on the market for years, and couldn't get a buyer for it.
My biggest investment is my property. And now I'm going to be looking, my property faces kind of southwest, right where I'm going to be looking at probably 7 of them. And nobody's going to tell me here that my property is going to be worth what I paid for it, because I never would have bought it, never would have thought about buying it if I was looking at windmills. So that's a loss for me. Not everybody gains on this. There's some landowners that might gain.
Independent studies of realty values in proximity to wind farms have been shown to be decreased significantly.
From where we sit in our home, we should be able to see 24 from the Ball Hill Wind Project, and we'll see many more from the Arkwright project, and the proposed Cassadaga project will be behind us with 30 more. So we'll have quite a lot in our area, and it's going to lower our family, our property values. It's just, it won't be home again.
All the things that make this special, they're going to basically destroy the things that make Chautauqua County different from Erie County.
Our world would be very much different if Mr. Norton had stayed to open meetings. And we weren't able to fight it because my attorney alone told me it'd be $250,000 to $400,000 to take the secret meetings to Albany and address them.
Is we accept a money from the wind company to pay the lawyer. That's a joke.
Intervenor funding of $126,000 has been provided to the towns and the public for legal representation during this review.
The same lawyer is all three deals, Arkwright, Cassadaga, and us, the Villanova. The same lawyer, the wind companies pay the townships, and the townships pay that lawyer. Now, this is all wrong. It's all been done in secret.
It's really terrible that this wind company would have license to come here and we have to accommodate them.
This is not only good for the operating engineers, but for all the trades as well. The laborers, iron workers, IBEW, you're talking over hundreds of people on this project.
The economy is also favorably impacted during the construction of these projects.
We anticipate hundreds of construction jobs resulting from Cassadaga Wind Farm and 6 to 8 full-time, well-paying jobs once completed.
And here we are again deciding on whether our members go without work and become victims of the state and unemployment agencies.
After the construction, there'll be 6 or 8 permanent jobs with this wind farm.
We have been assured that Everett Power will hire local labor as applicable.
When they tell you they're local, that means a union team 50, 60 miles away. I know our wind farm, that's what they told me. They're coming from Steuben County, and they have to be trained to get these permanent jobs. The permanent jobs will be people they bring in that are trained to work on wind turbines. So forget the jobs. It ain't going to happen except temporary road jobs and repairs because they're going to mess up our roads.
The proposed payment of $7,800 per megawatt for 20 years amounts to $19,656,000 that will be paid to the county, the towns, and the school districts involved.
When you talk about schools getting money and all, you are being bribed with your own money.
It's being presented as here is a way for people in your state to get free money. No, it's not, because when you produce wind power, it's much more expensive to consumers than conventional power. So all you're doing really is shifting money from everyone in the state who doesn't have a wind turbine to the very few who will have a wind turbine placed on their property. So you're giving money away from the many to the few. The people who have the wind turbines, oftentimes now they become landowners specifically just to put wind turbines on their property, and the money's coming from people who are often lower income people who have to pay the higher electricity rates. So it is something that is not free money coming in. We're just shifting it, and we're not shifting it in a good way.
It will put our local tradesmen to work, and the work will contribute to the local economy.
The few jobs that may come of it, are we willing to sacrifice our health and our environment for that?
But there's also service work that employs many of my members. I have a half a dozen members currently working in the other wind projects at a time of year when construction work is usually hard to find.
The only jobs that were created here are the repair jobs. The only thing guys you see working here are the giant cranes that are always fixing the giant pieces of junk.
The jobs that may be created, the economy that may be pumped, may be temporary compared to the long-lasting negative side effects.
Now, I know that it doesn't sound like that's a lot of people, but in a community that struggles for work of any kind or to move this community forward, it is important to us and our survival.